Round 2 of the 2026 AFL season is in the books, and while we should be excited and happy that football is back, there are many supporters that are going to be very upset over the next few weeks because carnage struck this past weekend. Join me today as we unpack all the action, get my votes in for best on ground, and select my team of the week. This is the round recap. What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And today's agenda is all about round 2. Recently capped off over the weekend and featured 7 games of football with 4 teams sitting out with the early season buys. Now, I have had this discussion many times on this channel before, and again, I would love to open the floor to you guys at home watching and get your thoughts and opinions, because this early buy structure bullshit is still something that rubs me incredibly the wrong way. Now, I understand the process the AFL are wanting to undertake here. They want to take football to rugby-dominated states like Queensland and New South Wales and get more exposure to the fans within those locations. I'm all for that. I think the idea of gather round, going to, Southern Australia and playing throughout there is a fantastic thing. Being able to spread our game nationally is never going to be a negative prospect. But I feel this buy structure that is going down compromises the competition in numerous ways. Obviously, we have the Community Series practice games, get a little bit of match fitness into players. Then we have opening round, where only a selected handful of teams play. Then we have round 1 proper, all 18 teams ready to go, 9 games of football. But some of those teams are playing against teams that have already played a game, have already had a practice match. Now, I've used Melbourne and Richmond as a great example in a previous video, and I'm going to hash on it again. Their Community Series game was ended before half-time due to lightning in the area, so they only had half a practice game to get match fitness and conditioning into players, and we treated that as a way to have rookies and kids get some exposure to the game. Neither side plays round 0 rather. See, I'm still calling it round 1. Neither side plays round 0. Coming into round 1, only have played half a practice game, coming up against a team that has had a full practice game and a full proper game under their belt. Further compromised by the fact that Melbourne themselves don't get their fucking first bye until after Hawthorn have had 2. I don't understand. And the teams that are getting these buys are teams that should be in circulation to play finals this year, so it gives them an upper hand, I feel anyway, to other teams in the competition. If they're going to stick with round 0, it needs to be a AFL-wide round. Do round 0 like you're doing. Have games in Queensland. Have games in New South Wales. Take it to Northern Territory. Go to Western Australia. Have a game everywhere, nationally. Highlight each and every state that weekend. Problem solved. Every team gets to play. You take away the early buys, you keep the mid-season buys as is. The competition becomes a little bit more equalised. I mean, we're already going to have issues and complications when Tasmania joins the fucking competition, because there is going to have to be a team missing every single week to a bye, because we're going to have an uneven amount of teams. So that tells me there's going to be an active hunt to get a new team into the competition in order to take it to 20 and equalise it again. It's just a monumental headache right now. Maybe I'm just carrying on like a fucking idiot, but feel free to disagree. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But we did have 7 rounds of football go down, the first of which started on Thursday night with Hawthorn hosting Sydney at the MCG, and this had theatre written all over it. 2 teams competing for a final spot. We know coming into this game, Sydney undoubtedly without their 2 best players in Isaac Heaney and Errol Goulden. Hawthorn needed to find a little bit of ascendancy in this game. We've already seen them lose a game, we've already seen them win a game, so which Hawthorn were we going to get? On the other hand, Sydney have come out and won both of their opening games heading into this round, so we were looking to find continuity on their end as well. but with no Errol Goulden, no Isaac Heaney, it truly exposed them in the midfield, and it was the likes of Jai Newcomb who was able to absolutely rip Sydney's defensive and midfield line apart. Him transitioning out of the midfield with his clearance work was absolutely sensational. Defensively, he was able to get back and chip out with the likes of Sicily, Barras, and all of these players that really elevated their game in this game. They absolutely locked that forward half for Sydney down. I mean, I think the scoreline here of 17 points flatters Sydney a hell of a lot, because this could have been and should have been a game where Hawthorn walked away with a 40-point win. It was as convincing a Hawthorn performance as I have seen for a very long time, and this is with the fact that at one point Sydney skipped away with a big enough lead that I thought maybe, a third of the way into the third term, this game was done and dusted and Sydney were going to walk away with a win. But we've seen Hawthorn dig deep and pull gutsy performances out before, and this is right up there with them. Breaking down the match timeline, you can see the transition of how this game was an arm wrestle, and then Sydney picked up a huge lead, and then Hawthorn wrestled it back. It was a sensational game to watch, and the one thing I can probably thank the AFL for so far is the 3 rounds of football we've already seen. We have actually had solid opening games, like Carlton Richmond in round 1. Okay, the skills might not have been there, but it was a close enough finish. That Friday night game following was fantastic. Last weekend, we had Hawthorn Sydney, and then we had Adelaide Bulldogs. Again, 2 great games. So at least structurally with the AFL fixturing, we have been given some actually half-decent games in the primetime slots, which, as a neutral, as somebody watching every game over the weekend, I can absolutely appreciate. Hawthorn at quarter time were behind, with Sydney leading 6-2-38 to 5-3-33, 5 points the buffer. At halftime, Sydney went in with a 1-point lead, 7-2-44, leading 6-7-43. During the third term, it looked done and dusted. Sydney come out of the gate and just went whack, 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 and it looked like Hawthorn were against the ropes. But somehow, they managed to bring it back to 11 points. 12-3-75 Sydney, leading 9-10-64. And the final scoreline, up until probably a third of the way through the final term, it just all went Hawthorn's way rather convincingly, with Hawthorn winning 14-15-99, defeating 13-14-82. What's interesting about this is nobody's talking about the scores and the score capacity that Hawthorn had here, the amount of shots they had versus the amount that Sydney had. The only statistics that people have been interested in talking about in this game is the free kick count, which was heavily lopsided. It was the way of Hawthorn by 11, 27-16. Now, you can argue Sydney probably kicked 1 or 2 goals from free kicks, but when you look at the free kick average here, 21 Hawthorn leading 17 Sydney, there's now some rhetoric around the competition that Vic bias, quote unquote, is still heavily a thing, because if you look at each game that was played out over the course of the weekend, it was the Victorian-based teams that won the free kick count, even though some of those games were only by 1 or 2 free kicks. I think it's ludicrous to think that's the case. Statistically, I mean, you can talk about the free kicks all you want, but they were 36.2% efficient inside forward 50 for 58 inside 50s, returning 17 scoring shots. Hawthorn had 29 scoring shots from 55 inside 50s, running at 67.3%. They were 31% better inside forward 50. Having a look at the disposals, they were better by 70 odd disposals around the ground. They had 16 more hitouts. The clearance game was actually surprisingly close, and Sydney won that by 2. But then you have a look at the contested possessions. Hawthorn cleared them by almost 30. Uncontested possessions, they were cleared by almost 60. Turnovers, Sydney had more of them. Hawthorn had 101 to 58 marks for the game. And again, this is a very similar shift to what we have seen with Hawthorn. They like to play 2 different brands. It's very hybrid of how they play. We know Hawthorn love to get the run and carry going. They're very much in the same vein of GWS with the Orange Tsunami when they start rolling off of half back. But Hawthorn are happy to chip the ball around defensively to get themselves in a position where they're going to be able to get that ball rolling. And very much so across half back, maybe just back half of the centre line out on the wings. They will happily chip the ball backwards. They'll go sideways, but they're hitting targets very meticulously when moving the ball. They find gaps, they wait, they're not pressured into moving the ball on quicker than they need to. They were very calm and very calculated, and it was on the back of defensive efforts that truly set them up in this game, which we will get to when talking about the vote getters this week, because my 3 vote might go to somebody that some people might be a little bit weary about whether or not he should be, but I feel it was one of the best defensive games I've seen from a defender in a very long time. But the rest of the stats around the ground all speak volumes to the fact that Hawthorn were just the better team. I mean, you can take 11 free kicks into consideration, but I don't see any way to statistically break down how many free kicks resulted in shots on goal or direct score involvement. That would be a good stat to start actually recording, but there's nothing to suggest that those free kicks were untoward or assisted in any way. As I said, there were a few free kicks that Sydney got. There were a handful that did end up resulting in goals. There was one that I saw where I think it was Jarman Impey had eyes for the ball, and when you've got eyes for the football, you're allowed in a contest to make shoulder-to-shoulder contact and position the body. He has eyes on the football the entire time, makes body-to-body contact with Joel Amadi, and Joel Amadi ends up getting a free kick dead in front of goal for basically a block or a shepherd, because I think it was Scrimshaw came in from the side and ended up marking the ball, and Impey didn't make a play for the ball. So the umpire perceived that as eyes on the player and just intent on taking the player out, which I think is very borderline, and there are a lot of borderline calls that we are going to be discussing over the course of this video. But moving on from team stats, we can move to player stats to talk about my votes for this game. There was nothing in the way of injury, there was no reports, so we can just happily dive on in and discuss who I thought were the better players in this game. There were a couple of players that were stiff, and for those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, watching one of these videos and you're unfamiliar with the process, it's like the Brownlow vote. 3, 2, 1, best on ground gets 3, third best gets 1. It's just a way for myself, after analysing each game, to sit down and do something a little bit fun and creative, and it's obviously going to help create discussion point as well, because my opinions might differ from yours at home. So again, when it comes to this video and the things that I discuss and do here, if you agree, if you disagree, I would love to have a talk about it. Always open to conversation down below, always respond to my comments, so I would appreciate it if you got on board. These 3 vote getters, though, I think were definitively amongst Hawthorn's best. I found it hard to pick out some Sydney players that really stood tall in this game. I thought Brodie Grundy in part was okay. Callum Mills was probably Sydney's best, and they had players stand up in certain situations, but I feel comprehensively Hawthorn and their players were better. I think Dylan Moore was stiff to not get a vote, so he'll get an honourable mention. Josh Ward, James Sicily, Connor McDonald, even Connor Nash. Lloyd Meek, I thought, did really well against Grundy as well. But at the end of the day, I can only give out 3 lots of votes, and the first of which I did land on Jack Gunston, who just keeps finding a way to kick bags, this guy. He just keeps getting better and better. The prospect that Gary Lyon has thrown forward of Gunston potentially kicking 100 goals this year, if he can stay on track with, 4 to 5 goals a game, not out of reach in the slightest. He had 13 disposals, 7 of which were contested, 6 marks, 330 metres gained, 4 goals, and 9 score involvements on the night. The 2 vote, I've already spoken about him, gave it to Jai Newcomb. I thought he was a barometer in that midfield. He had so much class. He was able to break away from the likes of Rowbottom, who is an absolute tackling machine. We know historically James Jordan runs a bit of a tagging role as well. They weren't able to shut this guy down. He had 31 disposals, 12 of which were contested, 3 marks, 2 tackles, 9 clearances, 337 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 7 score involvements. And best on ground to me was Tom Barrass. Again, I'm basing this year my decision-making process when it comes to best on ground not being the number of disposals somebody has. It's about impact. It's about effectiveness. And this guy on field absolutely towed Charlie Curnow up for 3/4 of football. Curnow was able to kick 2 goals early, and that was it. He had no impact for the rest of the game. This is somebody that I personally picked as my Coleman medal winner for this season. He was kept so incredibly quiet, and Barrass was just eating intercept mark after intercept mark. He was just spoiling everything that came his way, so much so that when I read out his stats, I've added some defensive stats in here just to give you an idea of just how impactful he was defensively. 15 disposals, 7 of those were contested, 11 of those were intercept possessions, 6 marks, 1 tackle, 178 metres gained, 1 score involvement, 10 spoils, 6 pressure acts. And again, after the opening quarter where Charlie Curnow was able to kick 2 early, kept him to a very pretty much statless game. His influence was absolutely squashed. He was taking intercept grabs late. Everything that kind of went his way was either getting punched out of bounds, tapped down to the ground for somebody else to pick up and run away with, or he was marking it cleanly himself. He was like the Rock of Gibraltar in that defensive line. They could not get past him. And in a game where Charlie Curnow's been touted as this high, profile recruit for Sydney, Joel Amadi last week popping off with the 5 goals, to have somebody stand tall like this and set up that defensive rebound, I thought he was deserving of best on ground. We now have an interesting prospect here. Sydney now knowingly are without Goulden for a long period of time. Isaac Heaney probably comes back within the next couple of weeks. It's going to be interesting to see whether Sydney have now been exposed a little bit to being able to completely shut that forward half down. I've been saying for the last few weeks that I thought Curnow's addition would make that forward line more potent in the way of being able to drag an opposition defender to him. But Hawthorn's defensive unit were just so incredibly clued onto that they were able to shut everyone down. This is going to be an interesting watch because Hawthorn have just shown their midfield can run with the best. Forward half of the ball, they have many threats, and defensively, they might just be one of the best defenses in the competition. Speaking of people blaming the umpires, Friday night saw Adelaide hosting the Western Bulldogs at Adelaide Oval, a location where the Bulldogs had never beaten Adelaide before until that Friday night, because it was the Bulldogs walking away with a 6-point win. And a lot of people are saying that the umpires handed the game to the Bulldogs. We will quickly run through the timeline before we get into statistical breakdown. But in this game, minus a period in the last quarter where Adelaide got in front, the momentum was with the Bulldogs the entire time. And when you see the free kick count, it's hard to argue that the umpires put them in this position. The Bulldogs at quarter time led 3-4-22 to 3 goals straight 18. At halftime, they led 7-5-47 to 5-2-32. At 3/4 time, they led 11-7-73 to 8-7-55, and the final score line was 14-10-94, defeating 13-10-88. I will say, when it comes to the umpiring, there were some iffy decisions both ways. I can openly agree with that. There was a decision early where, I can't remember which defender it was, but they essentially dove for the ball in their defensive half. Contact below the knees was made very marginally to Joel Frazier, but the difference between Joel Frazier and somebody else was the fact that Joel Frazier made sure the umpire saw that contact and flopped. The contact was there, he added some salt and pepper to it, and the umpire paid the free kick. If he just completely dove, I could understand the frustration, but there was very minimal contact there. There was enough contact there to constitute the free kick with a little bit of mayo added on top of it. As for Adelaide, however, from what I recall, there was at least 3 50-metre penalties paid to them in this game, 2 of which I'm still asking why they were paid in the first place. Jordan Butts, 80-plus games, never kicked a goal before. He gets held up after a free kick is paid for the smallest amount of time. Umpires blow the whistle and pay a 50. He goes back and kicks his first AFL goal. Later in the game, Sam Darcy somehow gives away a 50-metre free kick. Now, I still don't know how this second 50 was paid. It was either for... From what I can... I don't think it was overstanding the mark. I don't know if it was holding the player up. But a 50-metre penalty was paid, and then Josh Worrell goes over and scruffs Sam Darcy's hair. Sam Darcy slings him to the ground. Another 50 is paid. So it's a 100-metre penalty. I can understand the sling and Darcy giving 50 there, but I'm still trying to work out why that first 50 was paid. And there's been a few of those over the course of the opening rounds. There was a free kick still with that Collingwood-Adelaide game, the 50-metre that was paid, where I still don't understand why it was paid. We've seen other 50s paid over the course of the opening weeks where the umpire has been very quick to blow the whistle with not much regard as to explaining why the free kick was awarded, or giving enough time for the player to register that they need to do something right, whether they need to back off the mark, whether they've encroached on the mark, whether, they need to let go of a player, whatever the case may be. I feel the umpires this year are incredibly trigger happy, more so than we have seen in previous years, which is why we are seeing these free kick counts kind of balloon out. I mean, this game was 23-18 the way of the Bulldogs. To suggest 5 free kicks the way of the Bulldogs won them the game when Adelaide had 3 50-metre penalties given to them in this game, one of which, the 100-metre penalty that was paid, put Jordan Butts about 15 metres out from goal and he missed. So, I don't know. Hard to argue umpire and Vic bias and all that crap here, especially when you look at team statistics. The Bulldogs only had 4 more possessions around the ground. 4. They ran the handball game hard, 165 to 112. Adelaide had more kicks, 251 to 202. Efficiency was only less than a percentage. Bulldogs were better inside 50, 44% leading 38%. The hitouts were even. The clearance game was won by the Bulldogs, probably none so bigger than the likes of Marcus Bontempelli in the final quarter when the game was there to be won. I thought he was absolutely huge. Around the ground, it was contested possessions that the Bulldogs won it. They had more turnovers, so they gave Adelaide plenty of opportunity. The marking game, Adelaide had 119 marks versus 61. They had that defensive control that we saw them run against Collingwood. They're happy to chip the ball along the back line. 2 types of teams this year. I've highlighted it already. You've got the teams that want to run the handball game and get the ball moving quickly, and sometimes that works, sometimes it undoes everything. But the more methodical playing around the ground and chipping the ball and maintaining possession seems to be the way that certain teams are trying to lean into their styles this year, and that's definitely something Adelaide has been trying to get on board with. But yeah, I don't see the argument for umpires getting the Bulldogs over the line here, given the scope of what went down. I don't know. Kalachi has done a hamstring in this game, and that's not the first hamstring to be done over the course of this weekend. The amount of soft tissue injuries that were done in round 2 is absolutely insane. I think there's about 6 or 7 players, some of which are incredibly critical to their team, that are going to be missing for weeks because of soft tissue injuries. And the questions are now being asked whether or not, because the game is faster, these injuries are happening, whether there's conditioning issues at clubs, whether there's issues with the turf that they're playing on. But Kalachi is not the first hamstring of the weekend, unfortunately. It opens the door for another player to come in, but it was it was a great game of football to watch. On a Friday night, to see a game come down to a kick with a club like the Bulldogs 3-0 to start this season against 3 teams that are roundabouts going to be, first through to 10th on the ladder this year. 3 teams that should be in finals contention. Something the Bulldogs failed to do in 2025 was be competitive and win games against teams above them on the ladder. And people were calling them flat track bullies because they could only beat the teams below them. But so far, they have scalped Brisbane, GWS, and Adelaide in Adelaide. They scalped Brisbane in Brisbane. This is an impressive looking Bulldogs outfit that could go the distance this year. And we're only 3 rounds in, but they're looking the absolute goods. For the votes in this game, the one vote I found incredibly hard to bounce around, but I did land on Jordan Butts. I thought defensively for the Adelaide, he had an incredible game. 19 disposals, 5 of which were contested, 12 marks, 443 metres gained, 1 goal and 6 score involvements. The 2 vote and the 3 vote, I've swapped and changed a lot over the course of setting this video up, but I did land on Marcus Bontempelli. 30 disposals, 14 contested, 3 marks, 6 tackles, 7 clearances, 491 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, and 7 score involvements. As I said, his final quarter alone, I think almost single-handedly got Bulldogs over the line. When they needed the skipper to stand up, boy did he fucking stand up. Best on ground, however, I gave to the heir apparent in Joel Frazier. He had 24 disposals, 9 of which were contested, 3 marks, 3 tackles, 3 clearances, 473 metres gained, 3 goals, 2 goal assists, and 12 score involvements. The Bulldogs winning 3 in a row have them missing this coming weekend with the early buys. Adelaide, they've beaten Collingwood in a close game. They have lost to the Bulldogs in a close game. At least we are seeing some continuity in their game with being in the moment. They're not getting blown out of the water, so there is no alarm bells, and there is plenty to love at Adelaide, despite a couple of injury concerns. Obviously, Rory Laird a little bit injured, a little bit knocked up. Worrell's a little bit knocked up. They've lost Archie through his hamstring, but they've had the likes of McAndrew come through in the ruck as a first-year player and absolutely fitting in there. They've still got Jordan Dawson firing. They've got some other young talent around the ground like Cook standing up when opportunity has arisen and taking chances and just really getting involved in gameplay. It's exciting to watch from Adelaide. We're only 3 rounds in, so to ring alarm bells this early, unless you're one club, which we will talk about soon, is going the early crow. Adelaide will bounce back 100%. They're still finding their feet comparatively because they didn't get that early open round game, so you know they were a little bit behind with maybe who they were playing against. I just think collectively Adelaide, I did tout them at the start of the year as the team that was going to drop off a little bit, but defensively they are looking absolutely incredible. I wouldn't knock this team at all. I mean, they are missing components like Mark Keane, Mitchell Hinge, so once those players come back in, that defensive half becomes so infinitely more solidified, it is not funny. Bulldog supporters, I think they're living on cloud 9 right now. They're probably thinking, who can beat us? Which could be their detriment, but with a week off, I think they'll happily be sitting 3-0, and I just can't wait to see what the Bulldogs do next. They are looking absolutely incredible. The first game on Saturday was at the MCG with Richmond hosting the Gold Coast, and it went exactly how I expected it to. I had a feeling a 50-plus point win was on the margin for the Gold Coast here, given where Richmond are currently at. But as a Richmond supporter, I'm incredibly stoked that for half a game of football, we pushed a team that is currently touted as the premiership favourites. It wasn't until injury struck that Richmond went downhill incredibly fast, and it wasn't just Richmond that was struck with injury before halftime as well. 3 hamstring injuries delivered in this particular game to players that I feel structurally are huge to their given teams. We'll talk about the match timeline first. At quarter time, it was a dead heat, 2 goals, 2 apiece. At halftime, it was 10-5-65, Gold Coast leading 5-4-34. Again, it wasn't until about 3/4 of the way through that term where Tom Lynch and Toby Nankervis went down with hamstring injuries that the goals started to become, you know, thick and fast for the Gold Coast. And after that, it was just an absolute landslide. At 3/4 time, it was 14-9-93, leading 8-5-53. The final score, 19-14, 128, defeating 9-6-60. What are some exciting things to take out of this game as a Richmond supporter? We still managed to put 60 points on with no Tom Lynch. And I know people were piggybacking off of him in the first round, saying that, you know, we should have beaten Carlton if he kicked straight, and that is a very actual thing. But structurally, Lynch is so important to Richmond. And you can see with the timeline, when he comes out of that forward 50 and he stops not only becoming a target, but being able to bring ball to ground and structurally, you know, being able to point other players the way to go. Everything just broke apart without him. And we're going to not have him for the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's going to be incredibly rough. On top of that, Nankervis is going to be out for 5 to 10 weeks. And we don't have an heir apparent ruckman. We're going to have either a Category B rookie come in for his first AFL game, or we're going to have to hedge our bets on Samson Ryan. I don't want to hedge my bets on Samson Ryan at all if I can fucking escape it. For the Gold Coast, it was Christian Petrarca before halftime that I thought initially had been pulled off for hamstring awareness and was getting sat out because they had a healthy lead and they can afford to sit a player of his caliber off for a half just to be on the safe side of things. But it has been revealed he has done a medium strain and he will miss the next 4 to 6 weeks, which, even though early, almost cancels him out for the Brownlow. After the fact that he's going to be sitting, heading into round 2, probably in the lead with back-to-back best on ground performances, and the fact his statistics lined up in this game, that he was probably going to end up being close enough into vote calculation. I'll talk about his particular stats when we get to player stats. We'll break down the team stats first. Again, it was a game where the statistics in certain ways don't paint a huge disparity between the two. It's very much like Gold Coast and West Coast last week, where the scoreboard reflected one thing, but West Coast were more competitive away from the scoreboard. They had 55 more disposals around the ground, which I think, you know, that's to be fair. I mean, given Richmond's midfield, given the potent ability in that midfield alone for the Gold Coast, you'd not excuse them to be better off. Efficiency-wise, Richmond were only 6% behind the marker. Inside 50, though, is where it hurt. We were 41% efficient to 57. They did have 61 inside 50s to our 36. For stoppages, hitouts, we were beaten convincingly in the end, but we won the clearances by 11. That's a huge thing to take away out of this game. Stoppage clearance, we beat them by that 11. It was 9 we beat them by. We actually beat the centre clearances by 2. But to beat the Gold Coast in the centre clearance despite losing the hitouts by 13, I thought was a huge plus for us. It was something that we can hang our head high with. We beat them in contested possession. It was uncontested possession where they absolutely blew us away by 78 they beat us by. Me and maths don't get me started. But the fact that we turned the ball over 73 times and just opened up opportunity for them to, again, control the ball defensively, 127 marks to 83. They had 23 marks inside 50. They had more contested marks. Defensively, we laid 59 tackles. I thought that was actually really good. That's above our average. They hit their average. Tackles inside 50, though, they laid 17 to our 5. So there's a lot to be desired with how Richmond played, but there's a lot to love as well. And at this point of our infancy within this rebuild we're undertaking, some people are expecting us to be already at a point where we should be beating these teams, which I think is a bit ludicrous to think. At least, regardless of the scoreboard, I'm going into this season thinking and hoping that we can put on competitive performances. When you come up against a team, lose by 68 points to a club that, as I said, is currently sitting as the premiership favourite, and you beat them in centre clearances, and you beat them at the stoppage, and you're laying just as many tackles, you're showing a competitive nature around the ground. It's just a breakdown of being able to get hands on forward of the ball. I mean, we had 36 inside 50s, and of that we only managed to score 15 times, whereas they had 61 and they scored at least 30 odd times. So they were running at a decent strike rate. You know, it's just unfortunate that we're kind of missing some components, and especially now with Lynch and Nankervis out, we're going to be further missing components that can be effective on field, because we're expecting these young kids to be ready, but they need to grow. It's going to take 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years for them to hit their stride, so we need to be taking that at face value. Breaking this game down, I thought it was quite straightforward for my 3-2-1. Honourable mentions, despite the absolute belting, Jaden Short and Tim Taranto were Richmond's best. I'm not at all surprised. I also thought that Jack Ross had a good game for us as well. Around the traps, there was a couple that probably stiffed a miss here for Gold Coast. I mean, Ethan Reid kicked 4 goals and he doesn't get a vote this week, but when you have a look at the breakdown of the 3 I voted for, I think it's convincing enough. The 1 vote I gave to Touk Miller, who I feel in Rao's absence has stood tall. I feel his role at the Gold Coast is criminally underrated as well. 31 disposals, 5 were contested, 8 marks, 1 tackle, 4 clearances, 428 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, 10 score involvements. The 2 vote, and again, this was one that I flipped from 2 to 3, I gave to Bodie Hewland off of half-back. I thought he was sensational defensively. 29 disposals, 5 contested, 16 marks, 1 tackle, 490 metres gained, 5 score involvements. That was him done. Best on ground, he kicked 7, Ben King. Absolutely ripped us defensively apart. 11 disposals, 2 of which were contested, 4 marks, 1 tackle, 231 metres gained, 7 goals of which created the 7 score involvements. It's a shame that we were opened up after that opening quarter and 3 quarters of football. You know, not many teams are going to be sitting there as a supporter base saying that they're happy that they played a first half and got blown away in the second. But I'm taking as many small wins as we can get. There was enough glimpses out of this game to tell me that Richmond's future is bright. Gold Coast, on the other hand, I feel are a serious threat. And I feel not many people are taking them seriously because even though they defeated the Geelong Cats, they defeated Geelong in round 0, but then they've played West Coast and Richmond. So can we be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because they've beaten up on 2 teams that should be in the bottom 4? Can we take them a little bit more seriously if we can see 40 to 50 plus point wins against competing clubs? Remains to be seen. But boy, when they have ball in hand, they look absolutely dynamite. NG Stadium played host to GWS taking on St Kilda, which turned out to be a game marred in controversy. We will talk about the timeline first and then talk about the time that went missing out of this game, because the AFL have come out and conceded that there was time missing off the clock by the end of this game, which could have turned favour in this game completely. At quarter time, St Kilda looked to have this game absolutely squashed. 5-4-34 leading 1-3-9. At halftime, 8-8-56 led 3-6-24. At 3-quarter time, 10-10-70 led 5-13-43, and the final scoreline saw St Kilda 11-12-78 defeat GWS 10-14-74. Wayward kicking cost GWS this game. After half-time, St Kilda went on to kick only 3 goals for. GWS kicked 7 goals 8. They had this game in the palm of their hands and just could not get the job done. But it has been revealed there was a point during this game where the clock stopped, disappeared from the television screens, and the AFL has come out and said 29 seconds was lost from this game. Now, some could be sitting at home saying 29 seconds isn't that long of a time. I could make some jokes that would suggest that I think 29 seconds is a long time. But in all actual fact, 29 seconds on a football field can be the difference in any game. That is a mark defensively at half-back that could be slingshot into the forward line and taken as a mark to have a shot on goal. That could be a centre clearance that breaks away for a shot on goal, if not a goal scored. Now, I can't remember exactly at what time the game that this clock stopped and where the ball was. Some people getting a bit confused, saying, oh, the game ended in GWS's forward line, so it would have been in that moment. It wouldn't have been. It would have been where the ball was when the clock disappeared. And I think St Kilda at that time had just scored a goal and kind of had momentum back. But momentum can so easily shift. And I just hate that in the moment, there's no, acceptance of something that has gone wrong accepted, but they're happy to take acceptance of it after the fact when nothing can be done about it. It's all good coming out now saying, oh yeah, we're now looking at things to improve moving forward because 29 seconds went missing out of this game, but we're now presented with an ultimate what if. What if that 29 seconds was played out? Would have St Kilda gone on to kick another goal to put this out of doubt? Would have GWS been able to wrestle this back? I mean, 29 seconds is enough in theory to not only kick a goal, but kick a behind and then kick a goal to hit the front in a 7-point play. At any rate, a goal on its own right would have put GWS in front. So, a great conversation point to be had, and I know there's a few people that come through in these videos that support GWS, so I'd love to know your thoughts down below. Looking at the team breakdown, because I don't think there was any injuries out of this game of note. I will check just to make sure. No, Anthony Caminiti did a hamstring, so just add that to the soft tissue list of the fucking injuries this weekend. Absolutely woeful. This game has GWS written all over it. They had 50 odd more disposals. They cleared them by 70 in the handball game. They lost the kicking game, but cleared them. They had 9 more inside 50s for the game. They were 2% more efficient, so efficiency around the ground was actually pretty good. Inside 50, they were 9%, well 8% worse. Free kicks were pretty much even Steven. St Kilda beat them in the hitouts. They only just lost the clearance, GWS, so around the ground, they had more disposal. They were losing that ascendancy, but stoppage clearance, GWS managed to get on top of. It was just the center clearances where they got cleared. Uncontested possessions, they had 66 more GWS and just couldn't get anything done with it. It was so incredibly frustrating to watch. Tackles, they laid 22 more tackles for the game. GWS were just all over them. They had the ball in hand. They just couldn't capitalize on their opportunities. We can have a look at the people that have gone and missed here. This is something I like doing in real time, having a look at the behinds and looking at the people that we can blame. Clayton Oliver kicked 2 behinds. Xavier O'Halloran kicked 2 behinds. But I mean, again, Tom De Koning, he kicked 3 behinds. He converts any of those into goals, and it's a 2-kick ball game. So it's on the other side of things here. But like Lockie Ash, 1 behind. Callum Brown, 1 behind. Finn Callahan, 1 behind. Josiah Delana, 1 behind. Phoenix Gothard kicked a behind. Gruzewski kicked 1 behind. Jesse Hogan only kicked 2 goals, 1. Rouston only kicked 1 behind. I don't think Toby Green even scored. Jake Stringer only kicked 1. Yeah, Toby Green did not score. Had 21 possessions but didn't hit the scoreboard. It's a game that GWS are going to be kicking themselves over, especially coming out of a game against Bulldogs the week prior where there was no defensive effort to shut down a player like Bontempelli. And in this game, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira didn't pop off to the extent of a Bontempelli last week, but he finally found a little bit of ascendancy that has been missing in the opening weeks for St Kilda, and I feel he played a part in getting St Kilda over the line with the role he played. We'll get into the votes here, and you'll see why, because I did give Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira the 1 vote here. 27 disposals, 9 were contested, 4 marks, 1 tackle, 5 clearances, 694 metres gained, 3 goal assists, and 8 score involvements. Off of half-back for St Kilda, I gave the 2 vote to Jack Sinclair. 31 disposals, 5 were contested, 9 marks, 3 tackles, 1 clearance, 414 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. And despite losing, I thought Lockie Ash was best on ground. 39 disposals, 6 were contested, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 774 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. As a half-back, 9 score involvements I think is incredibly impressive. 9 marks defensively, being able to help set up. It's just a shame that an effort like Lockie Ash put in was overshadowed by the fact that so many GWS players were inaccurate on the day. Kingsley's going to be fucking fuming, and there's going to be a turning point for GWS. I just don't know why defensively they have broken down in the middle of the ground, because we see Lockie Ash absolutely outshowing defensive efforts every week. We see Lockie Whitfield still showing incredible defensive efforts. It's around the contest that too many players are being allowed to do things that they shouldn't be getting allowed to do. St Kilda, on the other hand, finally bounced back. They lose to Melbourne 2 weeks ago, and then this week they finally find some ascendancy. Naz is able to break out and not have much attention put to him in the midfield so he can get involved. Jack Sinclair running off of halfback has been sensational this year. What version of these teams are we going to get week to week? That's the issue. If GWS keep delivering a midfield that isn't paying any defensive mind, they're going to get beaten every week. If St Kilda don't have a plan B like they did in this game, where they kind of shifted some things around and things worked, and they go back to this bullshit Ross Lyon defensive game styles, can they sustain wins, or are we going to see them slip back into poor form? Two teams that are vying for that top 10 finish this year. Both teams, I still feel on paper GWS are a top 6 team. St Kilda more so looking for that wild card kind of 7 to or 8 to 10 or 7 to 10, whatever the fuck it is. But it's very interesting to see where these teams are at, because boy, you don't know what you're going to get from these teams each week, and it's so fucking frustrating. Optus Stadium then played host to Fremantle hosting Melbourne in a game that saw Fremantle scalp the Demons by 48 points. Huge win by Fremantle, and it was on the back of some suspects that aren't usually in the conversation. You'd normally think somebody like a Caleb Sarong would pop off, but he was kept incredibly quiet, which opened the gate for players like Brayshaw and Bolton and Luke Jackson to find some ascendancy around the ground. And I think that's what makes Fremantle such a threatening prospect. You shut one down and it opens the door for others to get off the chain. I feel their midfield setup is incredibly potent, and there is still players to be thrown around in the mix as well, because they had Hayden Young out this week. They still have Luke Ryan to come back defensively, I believe anyway. So we'll look at the match timeline, we'll do the team breakdown, and we'll talk about it, because there's some players I want to highlight that didn't get votes in this game, but I feel played a critical enough role to keep an eye on moving forward, just if you're a neutral supporter of the game. This was a contest that was the way of Fremantle all day, every day, and was dead at quarter time, in my eyes. 7-7-49 leading 1-1-7 at quarter time. 9-11-65 leading 5-4-34 at half time. It was then 16-13-109 leading 6-6-42. And then the final score was 17-16-118 defeating 10-10-70. Now, to only put on 1 goal 3 in the final term, I think they put the foot off the gas a little bit. I feel you can't afford to do that this year. If you're going to win, it's balls to the wall until the final siren, because now with this wild card structure in the mix, where 9 and 10 is now actively playing for a finals spot, percentage is going to be so incredibly critical to get you into that top 6 makeup. As I said though, dead in the water at quarter time. It was just a matter of how much they were going to win this game by. Don't think there were any injuries, but there was a contentious talking point that has seen... no, there was. Turner did a hand injury, but it's only a hand, so it's only minor. Luke Ryan did play in this game. I must have been absolutely blind, but he was only a late change, which I still feel, for somebody of his caliber, should not be a late inclusion. He should be in your best 23. The contentious point was Patrick Voss. And there were moments where Fremantle players around him kind of looked a little bit embarrassed in the moment, but him and Harrison Petty were having a back and forth, and Patrick Voss scruffed his hair a little bit and then did the crybaby thing. We know that there's been comments made to Harrison Petty in the past that made him cry on field during a heated moment, and people are still giving it to him. Now, Patrick Voss has been sanctioned for taunting. He did the crybaby thing, I get that, but if they're including the hair scruff in taunting, that happened on Sam Darcy by Josh Worrell in the game, where Sam Darcy then gave away a 50-metre penalty by slinging him to the ground following that hair scruff. If you take the theatrics out of the game and a little bit of banter back and forth on the field, if it doesn't borderline like homophobic slurs or racism or anything like that, a little bit of back and forth is welcomed, and I think it's part of the game. If we start stamping that out, we're becoming such a soft organisation. I don't understand it, especially when you've got blokes that are still running around doing gut punches and head high hits and not getting sanctioned for it, but you call someone a crybaby and you cop a fine. Fucking get out of here. Anyway, this game was very much so all the way of Fremantle. I mean, 417 to 333 disposals. The handball game for Fremantle eclipsed them by 82. They had only 2 more inside 50s for the game and still managed to get 48 on the board. So they could have very well blown this out by a much bigger margin, and as I said, they should have. Hitouts, Gawn only won the hitout count by 10 against the likes of Jackson and Darcy. I feel Darcy's time might be up, especially when Mason Cox is playing in the VFL and is putting up bigger numbers in the VFL than Sean Darcy's doing in the AFL. Could be time for Cox to come in. Fremantle won the clearance game, both stoppage and centre clearance. Uncontested possession, 262 to Fremantle to Melbourne's 193. Again, just happy to chip the ball around and maintain possession. They laid 10 less tackles, but I mean, when you've got more of the ball, you're expected to probably lay less tackles around the traps. And it was evenly adjudicated. Only 1 free kick extra the way of Melbourne. Nothing really untoward in this game at all. Now, I mentioned that Caleb Sarong was held very quiet. Now, when you have a look at the disposal count he had, how far down do I'm going to have to scroll to find his name? He only had 16 disposals and kicked 1 goal. Now, this is a guy that has double that on a weekly turnover. He was tagged by a very unlikely name. Now, this guy tagged Nasiah Wanganeen Malira the following, like the preceding week, and kept him incredibly quiet. And then he's done the same thing this week, and that's Colton Tholstrup. He had 11 disposals of his own and laid 5 tackles. So he only had 5 disposals less than Caleb Sarong. But I think you take that if you're keeping somebody who's averaging 30 plus a game to such minimal impactless numbers. It was an incredible showing for him, and I felt it was deserving enough to talk about, because it's not a huge name. It's not a name that is synonymous with Melbourne. It's somebody given a chance and given a new role, and I think Stephen King has found something incredible with Tholstrup playing this role. As for best on ground in this game, there were a couple that I could maybe throw it around with. I mean, Luke Ryan was actually more prominent than I realised. I probably should have paid more mind to the fact he played. I do apologise. Murphy Reed looked incredible out there as well. But the 3 I landed on, I think when you look at the outcome of the game, I think they dictated it quite heavily. The one that probably had a lot of impact but didn't get voted for this week was Luke Jackson, which might catch some people off guard. But I gave the 1 vote to Josh Tracy. He had 17 disposals, 12 of which were contested, 10 marks, 2 tackles, 335 metres gained, 4 goals, 1 goal assist, and 10 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Andrew Brayshaw. He had 39 disposals, 5 of which were contested, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 1 clearance, 503 metres gained, 1 goal, and 10 score involvements. And the best on ground marker for this game, as much as it pains me, it's Shea Bolton. Now, every time he has a good game, I see people posting, thanks for Shea Bolton, Richmond. You know what? Take him. Because I still argue as a Richmond supporter, he lacked defensive pressure. He is very much a one-way player. If it's all running offensive, all lights are green with him. And as soon as it was the other way around and the flip switched, he was not involved at all. And I will happily take recruits that we've landed like Taj Houghton and Sam Lawler over Shea Bolton long term. Hot take? Maybe. But he had 32 disposals, 15 of which were contested, 3 marks, 3 tackles, 9 clearances, 638 metres gained, 2 goals, and 9 score involvements. Probably the most prolific outing he has had as a Fremantle Docker so far, but he can have 32 and kick 2 this week. He could very much only have 12 and not score at all the following. So continuity has always been his downfall and could very much be his undoing moving forward. But again, Fremantle, getting a huge win like they needed. They needed to show that they're a serious team this year. I mean, they held Geelong at bay for so long and just fell short of the mark. They've come home and put on a convincing beating against Melbourne, but Melbourne again were one of those teams predicted to drop off. So can we look at this as a huge win for Fremantle? Can this be a momentum shifter for them? On the flip side with Melbourne, they get a big win against St Kilda. They get a big loss on the road. How do they sit with, you know, momentum and morality and everything else that goes with a huge loss? Mentally, it can break some players. So it'd be very interesting to see how both of these teams move forward. One obviously tipped to play finals this year, one to not miss it, but both playing competitive football in part. So it's very, very interesting because, again, Fremantle had a huge jump on Geelong 2 weeks ago, but then faded. At least in this game, they were able to maintain continuity. They must have worked on some things during the week to make sure they got it done. But could this just be the case that they're going to outperform at Optus and then underperform elsewhere? Remains to be seen. The first of two on Sunday saw Port Adelaide hosting a bloodbath at Adelaide Oval against Essendon. Essendon kicked the opening goal of this game, and then it was all Port Adelaide. And if it wasn't for Port Adelaide taking their foot off the pedal a little bit, this could have been a 100-plus point smacking. It did fall the way of Port Adelaide by 63, but boy, at one point it looked like it was going to balloon out to so much worse. At quarter time, it was 6-5-41, leading 1-3-9. At half time, it was 10-7-67, leading 2-6-18. At three-quarter time, it was 15-10-100, leading 5-8-38. And the final score line was 20-13, 133, defeating 10-10-70. This, again, was another game marred by injury. Connor Rozee going down with a hamstring. He is going to miss up to the next 3 weeks. And Dyson Sharp, young rookie who has debuted this year for Essendon, went down with an injury as well that might see him sidelined for a little bit too. So, unfortunate circumstances again for both sides. Connor Rozee probably more structurally missing for Port than Dyson Sharp would be for Essendon, but so many soft tissue injuries this weekend. It was absolutely mind-boggling to see so many go down. Looking at the team stats, it's not hard to work out that there was ascendancy all the way of Port Adelaide here. Disposals, they won it by 70. The kicking game, they cleared them by over 100 kicks. 100 kicks. 100 kicks. Did you take that in? Holy shit. They only had 17 more inside 50s. That's absolutely insane. When you dominate the stats like that. Their efficiency inside 50 was 68%, running against Essendon's 46. The free kick count actually went the way of Essendon by 4, which obviously didn't play into much. Essendon actually won at the hit-out count, but got absolutely destroyed in the clearance battle by 26. By 26? By 16. By 16. Still a smacking in retrospect. Uncontested possessions, they had 76 more around the ground. Port Adelaide actually turned the ball over more too. So just the mark count, 165 to 58. I think there was a stat that was thrown up by Kane Corns as well, that in the first quarter, Essendon only laid 7 tackles. I was saying before that 2 to 3 games into the season isn't alarm bell ringing time, but for Essendon, very well may be. And I feel it is not a player problem because they've got injuries left, right and center. I mean, I think Mason Redman's been confirmed to have done an MCL, so he's going to miss for some time now as well, which is unfortunate for them. But I feel this is a coaching problem. We know Zach Merritt wanted to leave Essendon quite severely, and I think it's running from the top down. I mean, in a post-game press conference where you've lost by 10 goals, and you throw young Josh Caddy under the bus by just one shot on goal that he missed, even though he should have kicked it. Okay, fair enough. Do not throw a kid like that under the bus, because that loses so much favor from the players towards yourself. This is a team that is showing no effort, I feel, because they've got no trust in the coach and they've got no trust in the systems at hand. They are just comprehensively getting beaten. And with the result of the final game of this round to come up, Essendon are now sitting on the bottom of the ladder as only one of 3 teams that are winless. And genuinely, looking at the way Essendon are playing, even though they finished strong in this game, the scoreline favours them. because Essendon could very well be a team this year that struggles to win a game, and opportunity to do so might be few and far between. I don't say that to bash on Essendon at any way. It's just mind-blowing that this is a team that some people thought they might play finals now that the wild card's coming around. I personally tipped them as a bottom 4 team. I had Richmond beating, more opponents than Essendon this year and notching up more wins, but this was bad. It was as uninspired a performance for 3.5 quarters of football that I've ever sat down and watched. I honestly thought, as I said at one point, this was going to be 100+ points the way of Port Adelaide, and Essendon probably lucky it wasn't. I definitely feel Brad Scott's time is numbered. His time's going to come. I reckon he might not even make it to halfway through the year. If Essendon are serious about moving forward, they need to get rid of Brad Scott. Just my personal opinion. For the votes of this game, not any surprise here. It's 3-2-1 the way of Port Adelaide. I tossed and turned between 2 and 3, but I'm happy with where I landed. The one vote I gave to Alia. 21 disposals, 4 of which were contested. 19 marks. I thought at one point he was going to eclipse the all-time mark record of 24. He only just fell short of that. 1 tackle, 308 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. The 2 vote could easily be argued for best on here, but I didn't give it to him. I've given it to Jason Horne-Francis. He had 26 disposals, 7 of which were contested, 10 marks, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 416 metres gained, 3 goals, 4 goal assists, and 12 score involvements. And best on ground was Zach Butters. A slow start, but a very strong finish. 36 disposals, 10 were contested, 7 marks, 6 tackles, 7 clearances, 771 metres gained, 2 goal assists, 13 score involvements. This was the way I was expecting Port Adelaide to play these opening games, because when you look at them structurally for the first 10 rounds, they have opponents lined up against them that I thought they would easily beat, but they lost to North Melbourne 2 weeks ago. They come out here and absolutely smack Essendon. Where is the continuity going to be with this team? I know they've got a new coach, they've got new systems in place. They're now missing some key components with Rosie and some other injuries around the traps, but Port Adelaide's biggest problem is going to be Port Adelaide this year. Essendon, on the other hand, I think we've spoken about them enough. We will move forward. The final game of the round was at Optus Stadium, seeing West Coast pick up their first win of the season against North Melbourne. You heard me correctly, and I'm spewing I didn't tip them, because even though I tipped North Melbourne, I said many times in that tipping video, I feel West Coast can win this game because of the efforts they put in despite the scoreboard against the Gold Coast the week before. And this was a game that the match timeline will tell you should have been out of reach for West Coast, given the jump that North Melbourne had. But after quarter time, it was all the way of the Eagles. At quarter time, it was 7-1-43, leading 3-1-19. Then, half time, 9-1-55, led 7-6-48. We were going to be in for a huge second term, and we got that exponentially. West Coast jumped to 15-7-97 to North Melbourne's 11-1-67, and the final score was 17-9-111, defeating 15-14-94. Unfortunately, a little bit too far out of reach, but West Coast in the third term jumping by 8 goals won. North Melbourne only managing 2 goals for the term. West Coast they were a different breed in the second half. They played some exciting football. Injury-wise out of this game, I think Liam Baker got injured from memory. Let me have a look. Alright, so he's not listed here as injured, but Edwards ended with a concussion, so he will mix next week, and Logue for North Melbourne had a thigh injury. Now, there was an issue here where after a goal was kicked by Elliot Yeo on the boundary line, and that was a brilliant goal. It had shades of Dom Sheed in the grand final about it. Charlie Comben was on the mark. Harley Reid runs up to him. Comben kinds of throws the The forearm up. Harley Reid in isolation does look like he flops down to the ground, but I mean, you've just banned Darcy Gardner from Brisbane for attempting to spoil a ball double-fisted and making high contact with Aaron Norton. Comben throws the fists out knowingly at Harley Reid, makes high contact, and the AFL have said there's no case to answer because Harley Reid added to the momentum and the hit itself. Glad to see the MRO are just rolling the fucking roulette reel and giving out what they see fit. Nothing else to report out of this game apart from the fact that West Coast have broken a huge drought with their time from their last win up until now for a club that wasn't supposed to win a game by many experts. They said the same thing about Richmond last year. They said it about West Coast this year. And currently West Coast have won a game before Richmond, which has... I've seen so many posts online about people now questioning whether Richmond's rebuild are behind West Coast off of one win. It's... Don't get me started. Let's move on. Statistically, it was even, and they swapped and changed. Like, disposal count was only 13 total the way of North Melbourne. Eagles had more kicks. North Melbourne had more handballs. North Melbourne had less inside 50s. They actually had 11 less inside 50s, and they only won by 17 points. So they're probably lucky in the end that they didn't get blown out a little bit more, North Melbourne. North were more efficient by only 3%. It was a high free kick game, actually, both exceeding their average of 24 to 25. The hitouts was monstered by Tristan Cherry, 54 to 27. Clearances actually went the way of North by 9. The possession game was won collectively by uncontested in the way of West Coast. Uncontested was the way of North Melbourne. North actually had 13 more turnovers for the game. They both had 67 marks for the game. Tackle count was only split by 3. So in the clinches, it was a close contest. It was what we wanted from two teams that were probably predicted this year to be about bottom 5, bottom 6. A great watch. As a neutral supporter, I was so happy to see West Coast get up. I've got some close friends who are diehard West Coast fans that are so happy to have picked up a win. One of my very close friends is a North Melbourne supporter, and I still don't know how he's truly feeling about this outcome, but when it came to trying to pick the votes this week, I actually turned to one of my West Coast supporting friends, because when you look at the player ratings for this particular game, as I try to do that on screen right now, all the higher ended rated players are all from North Melbourne. I mean, out of the 6 top rated, one of them is West Coast, and that was Harley Reid. And even then, 3 players are rated higher, and I would argue there's a 4th that maybe did more impactfully on the ground that would be rated ahead of him. So when it came to this, I had my 1 vote and my 3 vote locked in, and I was tossing and turning with the 2 vote, and I turned to my West Coast supporting friend and I said, look, this is where I'm at. What are your thoughts? Because I don't like the fact that West Coast have won this game by 17 points, but I'm leaning towards giving 3-2-1 all to North Melbourne players. And he actually said that he was convinced that the 3 vote and the 2 vote should have gone to North players, which is what I have done here. But the 1 vote was pretty much like throwing a dart at a dartboard, and wherever it landed, somebody could have gotten a vote here. I have gone for 3 North Melbourne players here, and I haven't done that to discredit West Coast win at all. I just feel the player that I've landed on with the 1 vote makes sense to the breakdown of the game. And honourable mentions, I suppose, must go to Caleb Daniel from North Melbourne. I think he laid like 11 tackles. Ruben Jinby in defence for West Coast was huge. Jamie Cripps and Waterman up forward. Obviously Harley Reid, a career high 30 disposals. But the 1 vote I gave to Nick Larkey, 10 disposals, 5 contested, as I choke on my own words. But the 1 vote I did land on Nick Larkey. He might have only had the 10 disposals, of which half of those were contested. 6 marks, 2 tackles, 130 metres gained. But he had 6 goals, 1 goal assist, and 8 score involvements. In a game where they only managed to kick 10 goals, and he's pretty much kicked it all himself, how could you not give the bloke a vote? The 2 vote, I landed on Harry Sheezel. Again, I didn't have him in this spot. I originally had Harley Reid at one point, but it was my West Coast supporting friend who said that he felt Harry Sheezel was best in this role. So with him ticking it off, I'm happy to lock it in. 40 disposals, 14 were contested, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 8 clearances, 612 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 4 score involvements. Funnily enough, Coaches Awards did not get a single vote from the coaches in this game. Harley Reid got given a perfect 10 out of 10. The man that I am picking as best on ground, who I thought convincingly, even my West Coast supporting friends said he was best on ground convincingly, only got 6 players' votes, which I think is absolutely insane. But I thought best on ground was Tristan Cherry. He had 25 disposals, 23 of which were contested, 4 marks, 9 tackles, 43 hitouts, 7 clearances, 173 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. What right does a ruckman have to lay 9 tackles and have 7 clearances? 23 of 25 disposals contested. Most of his numbers ranked in top 4 players on the ground. All numbers. Wasn't marked best on ground by the coaches. I thought it was absolutely insane, but he to me was clearly best on ground. What makes moving forward interesting is North Melbourne, I believe, take on Essendon this coming week. Do we get the North that played against Port Adelaide, or does Essendon pick up their first win? It's so flippy floppy. With West Coast, does this win give them enough momentum and self-belief to move forward? I mean, as I said, against the Gold Coast, the scoreboard didn't reflect it, but I thought they played competitive football. Very similar with Richmond against the Gold Coast this week. Scoreboard didn't reflect it, but there was competitive football being played. I think West Coast supporters at this point, they've won a game. They're ecstatic. They would love to see more wins, don't get me wrong, but I think as long as they get efforts like this every week and they see players digging deep for the club, I think they take that as a moral victory all day, every day. With all the games tallied up, we can now look at the votes collectively to see who is leading the MVP award for the 2026 season. In third place, collectively, we do have a bulk of players on 3 votes. Running down the list, we have Dane Zorko, Errol Goulden, Ed Richards, Jake Stringer, Nick Watson, Dylan Stevens, Jacob Van Ruin, Wayne Malira, Joel Amadi, Max Holmes, Yaga Smith, Harry Sheezel, Ben King, Jack Gunston, and Zach Butters. In second place, tied on 5 votes, we have Nick Dacos and Tristan Cherry. And in the lead, tied on 6 votes, we have Christian Petrarca, who is about to sit on the sidelines for the next month or 2. And we have Marcus Bontempelli, collectively on 6 votes. With my bullshit votes out of the way, we can turn attention to the most prudent thing, and that is the AFL ladder. First kicking off with the top 6, with first and second tied on 3 wins apiece, both undefeated, separated by percentage, and that percentage is rather huge because the Gold Coast is sitting in first on 191% and the Bulldogs are sitting in second on 137%. In third place we have Sydney, and in fourth we have Hawthorn, both equally sitting on 2 wins. We then have Fremantle and North Melbourne rounding out the top 6, both on a win apiece. The top 10 is then rounded out by Port Adelaide, Adelaide, Collingwood and St Kilda, with Melbourne, West Coast, GWS, Geelong and Carlton rounding out 11 through to 15, all of which are on a win. So currently we've got 5th and 15th purely separated on percentage. It's still early days, it's still only 3 games, but that's what I'm saying. Percentage is going to play a huge factor into this season. The bottom 3 consists of Brisbane, Richmond and Essendon, all looking for their first win, and Essendon obviously being the butt of everybody's joke this current week because West Coast have won a game before Essendon. Essendon's on the bottom of the ladder. People are saying West Coast are going to win the flag. There's some delusional shit going down, but that's how our ladder looks after 3 rounds. The final thing for myself to do before we can recap the round officially is to announce my team of the week, and I am very happy with the lineup this week. I think everybody selected, there can be no arguments made for their role. You can probably argue that there should be some inclusions, but I think the players I've selected, you can't argue for them to be replaced, which always makes it hard, but always creates discussion. So again, if you agree, if you disagree, let me know in the comments down below, but this is where I landed for my team of the week for round 2. In defence, I have Lockie Ash and Cal Wilkie in the back pockets and Tom Barras at full back, with Jack Sinclair and Bodie Hewland on the half-back flanks and Jordan Butts at centre-half back. In the centre, I have Shea Bolton and Touk Miller on the wings, with Andrew Brayshaw as this week's vice-captain in the centre, with Tristan Cherry in the ruck, Zach Butters at ruck rover, and Marcus Bontempelli, this week's captain, at rover. Up forward, I have Joel Frazier and Jason Horne-Francis on the half-forward flanks and Nick Larkey at centre-half forward, with Jack Gunston and Josh Tracy in the forward pockets and Ben King at full forward. In the interchange, I have Aaliyah, Caleb Daniel, Max Gawn, Harry Sheasel, and Jai Newcomb. My coach of the week is Andrew McQualter for West Coast's first win, and the assistant coach, I have gone for the duo of Luke Beveridge and Josh Carr. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the round has officially been recapped. When we return, it will be another recap with another set of buys. It is stupid, I know, but again, let's talk about it in the comments down below. While you were down there, if you did enjoy today's video, I would appreciate it if you hit that like button down below. And while you're at it, if you want to get aboard with the community we are building, get on board by hitting that subscribe button down below as well. Again, aside from things that we can discuss from this video in the comments, if you have any ideas for content you would like to see, let me know down there as well, or hit me up on social media. Those links are in the description of this video. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.